Okay, so what we're going to do now is talk about the Style Prism, that little triangle, the Illuminati triangle. And it's important to know that we put a lot of thought into this prism. The words, you've got two words on each of the corners of the prism, and they resonated for us. We went through hundreds and hundreds of words. Fresh is really an important one, fresh and sleek, right? Generous and energetic, and then of course, intellectual and framed. And those are the categories that we came to, but they are by no means exclusive to the wines, right? You're going to find that the wines kind of move around in between them, especially as winemaker style evolves, but also vintage variation. Secondly, you'll see words in the middle of the prism, and they are important words. They're the kaleidoscope of words that really resonated for us about how these wines are all unified. So those are sophistication, right? Oregon Chardonnay is very sophisticated. Savory, for sure. We've spoken a lot about this word. Umami, which is similar to savory, but a little different. Acidity naturally, and drive, that energy that carries them. And so Eugenia, let's get into those specifics. So let's start with fresh and sleek. And talk me through winemaking and the vineyard mindset around fresh and sleek.
Yeah, Gillian, I think the thing that was so fun about putting this together was tasting all these wines and finding over time, we found their commonality. And that's what started to give us the opportunity to make a framework in the beginning. And when we started with sleek and fresh, it's very hard to imagine a really well-made, authentic Oregon wine that isn't fresh. It's just our number one term for what we do up here. But a lot of that is about choices in winemaking. So picking early. And every one of these wines is going to have that acidic backbone and that tension. That's something we found through all the wines. So it becomes part of the vocabulary in all styles. But with fresh and sleek, you can use a little stainless steel. This is where you might add that kind of winemaking to really bump up that freshness and brightness. Very little use of wood and virtually no use of new wood. You're really asking the grape to carry the weight here. And I think what marveled all of us is that when we tried to define these wines, we didn't come up with fruit terminologies. We didn't use the usual fruit terms that we're accustomed to. And in this category, we really came up with, snap pea, spearmint, white clover. These were more earth tones and green garden. Had a very different set of vocabulary than we would use for simply a stainless steel made wine.
Okay, let's talk about generous and energetic. Now we're moving into obviously more of a yellow framework, right? I mean, if you think about wine as a shape, and I often do because you know that I'm right. So fresh and sleek is arrow-like, and generous and energetic begins to get some of that roundness on the mid palate. Talk about the winemaking aspects that go into that, and wine growing, of course, and then also what kinds of descriptors we're considering.
Yeah, again, winemaking here, you're going to pick a little bit later. And let's remind people that in California, we pick Chardonnay between sort of 23 and 25, maybe 26 bricks, trying to really build in those tropical fruit flavors. And in Oregon, we're picking at 19 to 22. So your alcohols are automatically lower and your acids are higher and your pHs are lower. So you're bringing in a lot of mouthfeel through pH. So for this particular style, you're picking a little bit later, you're using probably puncheons, you have a little bit of new wood, you're winemaking, stirring lees. These are things that can push that term generous, but we still have energetic because we still have that acidic backbone in our wines.
I mean, the thing again is because Oregon has a shorter growing season and it doesn't have that 220-day, like boom, you can pick whenever you want kind of situation. You're not getting the mangoes and the super ripe pineapples of that sort of orange world pantheon.
And we have done that experiment. I made poor Ken and Shane do that in, I think it was 2014. And we took a block and I said, now we're going to split this block and we're going to pick it normal. And then we're going to leave it on the vine. And I think we picked it at 24 bricks and it
Ooh.
tasted like old apple skins.
Right. So you
Right.
can't just, replicate what's going on in
That's
another
correct.
region.
Right.
So that last portion of the triangle, which of course is going to be interesting to a lot of people who like wines, say from Burgundy, is intellectual and framed. And it's so interesting because framed was the word I remember that the winemakers were particularly interested in when we showed them this. They said, yes, framed. And that's structured. So let's talk a bit about the winemaking side and the viticulture side of that, and then let's get into the descriptors.
Well, and the thing that's sort of interesting here is if you're looking at picking times, and we just picked generous, a little riper than we did fresh, that's not what happens here. This is not about picking riper. This is not a spectrum, a linear spectrum of ripeness here. So this is the style that you certainly get from Brickhouse, Walter Scott, these very intellectually thought out winemaking styles. So again, they want Mother Nature to give them the structure, the higher acid and the lower pH. That's Mother Nature's job there, and that's when you pick in the vineyard. But here they really they work with reductive winemaking, again, larger cooperage, a lot of lees stirring, but you're trying to build depth into the middle of this mouth, but you're doing it through the very subtle exercises that you do in the cellar. And here you're moving into, again, we're not doing these fruit elements. You're moving into oyster shell and flint and chalk, marzipan. And if you get something like apricot blossom, which I think you do here, it's not the apricot part of it, it's the blossom part of it.
All right. So I think that really kind of encompasses it. And again, things are going to shift around, and it also may depend on like where a wine is in its particular life cycle in a bottle. So how do you use this prism as you taste and you explore JFW's Chardonnays and you look at other Oregon Chardonnays? Consider, is this in the fresh world? Is it here? Or is it in the generous world? Here. Or is it maybe like in the totally framed world, like, an operatic song that I really can't pull off?
Yeah, I think one of the beauties of the exercise that we did, well, we realized that there were some similarities between Oregon Chardonnays that we could pretty much count on wine by wine, and the backbone being that racy acidity. And then the fruit was so different because we weren't using all of the terms we're familiar with, which are the very ripe fruits, but there were fruit flavors that were more nuanced towards what's that fruit like in springtime before it's developed into its most ripeness, and what are some of the herbal aromatics that we get from basil and cilantro and these kinds of herbs. And these were commonalities, and that really helped create the prism. The real fun is tasting wine after wine and dropping it into this triangle and finding out where you think it falls inside this prism.
Absolutely. Sounds like fun to me.